individuals. You understand how incredibly smart they are. I remember right after about the 2020 election, I had the opportunity to introduce Senator Rick Scott or endorse him or nominate him to be the head of the NRSC. And so we were with my Republican Senate colleagues, and I just asked them, because in 2020, unless you're in a battleground state like this, you don't get to come to these rallies like this. And so I just asked my colleagues, first of all, how many had been to a rally, and maybe about a third of them had. And I said, do you know what the one attribute is that all these people, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions by now, of people who go to Trump rallies, go to J.D. Vance rallies, you know what they all share in common, the one attribute? Didn't get an answer, so I answered the question for them. They love this country. They fervently love this country. And they also love the man, in this case now the men, who they also know they love this country, Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. As we now witness Vice President Harris, her closing argument is, I guess, say that we're all a bunch of Hitler lovers. It does kind of remind me, 5 days before President Obama won the presidency in 2008, I remember he said, in 5 days we are going to fundamentally transform America. Remember that? Now the question I'd always ask, do you even like, much less love, something you want to fundamentally transform? It's kind of like I wake up in the morning, Jane, I love you, now I'm going to change everything about you. That wouldn't go over very well. But it's also not a sign of really loving this country. Now, let me be clear. I do believe that the vast majority of Americans, whether you're Democrat, Republican, Independent, they do understand what is so wonderful about America, right? And they love this country. But I would argue their leaders are not real fond of America if you want to fundamentally transform it. And that's, I think, a real problem in America. Anybody see the Madison Square Garden rally yesterday? Pretty darn remarkable, right? You had more than 25,000 people inside, 75,000 outside. And the Democrats, of course, backed up by the legacy and corporate media, are comparing that to a Hitler rally. No, that is a celebration of America. And one of the reasons you like coming to these rallies is you're surrounded by people that love this country. I was traveling, so I didn't get to see the whole thing, but I've seen clips. I think one of the greatest lines was Tucker Carlson pointed out that he didn't think Kamala Harris has ever been accused of doing something useful. I think that's probably pretty true. And by the way, that fundamental transformation, what that is they are fundamentally destroying this country. That's what President Trump and J.D. Vance are trying to prevent, is the further destruction of this country. One thing else I think the news media is missing about that Madison Square Garden rally is we had on display the incredible coalition that Donald Trump has now assembled. Again, I'm 69 years old. I've been around politics, or I've watched politics for quite some time. The Democrat Party is not the party of our parents and grandparents. The party that actually did care about Americans and about American workers. Now that is us. Donald Trump has transformed the Republican Party. We are now the party that not only represents, but we are the party of the working men and women of America that made this country great and will make it great again. What also is not really being recognized in the legacy media is the group of people that have now joined this coalition. When we take a look at Robert F. Kennedy Jr., I've gotten to know Bobby Kennedy. He's a really First of all, he's a really good person, but he's also really smart. You know, Tulsi Gabbard, if you've listened to her, she's really smart. Elon Musk, I mean, the guy is a genius. And the person you're going to be listening to here shortly, and I'll say a little bit more about him, but J.D. Vance, really smart. Now again, these individuals come from diverse backgrounds. But again, like you, they all love this country. Also like you, they realize that Democrats are the threat to democracy, right? I mean, in the end, that's why Bobby Kennedy joined Donald Trump, is he realized that the party of his father, of his uncle, is not the party that he recognizes. His party left him, and they left America behind. And so the beauty about that new alliance between Bobby Kennedy and Donald Trump, you got to give both those individuals credit. Now, they don't agree on everything, but they're focusing on an area of agreement, chronic illness. And in doing so, they are demonstrating exactly how you heal and unify a horribly divided nation. So again, I give Donald Trump and Bobby Kennedy all kinds of credit for doing that. But again, what that coalition represents, I mean, Bobby Kennedy is synonymous with the Democrat Party. You know, Tulsi Gabbard apparently just changed her registration to Republican. Elon Musk, you know, what a fabulous addition he'd be to any administration. The efficiencies are, you know, we could use that in the federal government. So again, these are smart people, and we need to recognize this is a realignment in American politics, and from my standpoint, it gives me a great deal of hope. In an imperiled nation, I am hopeful that we can turn the situation around with that coalition that Donald J. Trump has assembled. So I have to ask, how many of you have already voted? Okay, that's great, great. It's not enough. I'm sorry, it's not enough. Now, you've got to spend all your waking moments between now and the election day to find other people and help them vote early, take them to the polls on election day. We have to do this. We're not going to get help from our education system. We're not going to get help from the legacy corporate media. This is going to be up to we the people to save this country. Are you willing to do it? Now again, you are going to, in a few moments, you're going to hear from an extraordinary individual. Again, I was just up with him in a rally. I have seen J.D. Vance up close and personal. I've seen him as he brings his wife and children to the Senate lunch. I see how he treats them as a father. On the flight up here, you're saying that the one bottom line, I mean, the one non-negotiable for J.D. Vance in terms of this campaign, he's been tireless. He's been doing a fabulous job. How about the debates? You know, how about the way he answers questions from the legacy media? By the way, just a quick aside. I think it was a couple Sundays ago, he's on Martha Raddatz on This Week. And he was talking about how, you know, the Venezuelan gangs have taken over these apartment buildings in Colorado. And Martha Raddatz goes, you know, kind of fact-checking him, well, Senator, it's just a handful. And JD goes, Martha, do you hear yourself? Are you just like a handful of apartment buildings taken over by Venezuelan gangs is okay? It's not okay. But anyway, getting back to the point I was making, so the one negotiable for J.D. Vance in this campaign is as tirelessly as he's worked, what a wonderful candidate he has been, he has to spend Halloween with his children, okay? And of course, for the Democrats, for Tim Walz, that's weird. No, I'm sorry, Tampon Tim, you're weird. So, unfortunately, I only served with JD for 2 years. I'm only going to be serving with him as a senator for 2 years because he's going to be the next Vice President of the United States. But during that time, JD didn't talk at every lunch or every meeting, but when he spoke with intelligence. He spoke as articulately as you've seen him speak. He is a smart person and wonderful vice president picked by Donald J. Trump. So you're in your treat for tonight, but you understand what this is all about and you understand how important this is. Our nation is in peril. The fundamental transformation, which is the fundamental destruction of America, is well down the path. We've got to turn it around. This is a make or break moment for America. I agree with Elon Musk when he says if we don't win this election, we'll probably never get another chance at a free and fair election. That's just the truth. I mean, Democrats, they resist all controls on an election. Voter ID, forcing people to prove that they are a U.S. citizen. They reject all of that. They want to make it easy to cheat. Why? Because they want to cheat, right? And my guess is they do cheat. So what we need to do, again, you voted, you got to get other people to the poll because we need such an overwhelming result that, as Donald Trump says, we need the result that's too big to rig. That is your job. That's all of our jobs. And we're up for it, right? Because, again, we are trying to preserve this nation because, in the end, what this is, it's a fight for that one essential ingredient that's made America great. First of all, you've made America great, but the essential ingredient is what you've used. Our ancestors use it. You use it to dream and aspire and build and create this marvel of a country. It's called freedom. And in the end, what next Tuesday is about, it is a fight for freedom. It's not somebody else's fight. This is our fight, and it is a fight that we absolutely must win. So God bless all of you. God bless your efforts. God bless America. Have a great evening. Thank you for coming out. Thank you. Thank you.
A lot of people feel like the American dream is further and further away. That if you work hard and play by the rules, it's a little bit harder to get ahead. It's a little bit harder to support a family, a little bit harder to buy a home. The world I grew up in was one where I think for the first time really in American history, my parents' generation did not expect their children to necessarily have a better life than they did. And you saw that in all kinds of different ways, but there was this sense growing up in Middletown in the 1990s that a lot of people didn't expect the future to be better than the past, and that's a really unique and a really tragic thing. The jobs started to disappear from that community, drugs started to move in, hopelessness started to move in, and so a lot of people who really knew that the future would be better than the past actually found a world that was a lot more difficult and a lot more challenging. I wrote Hillbilly Elegy because I wanted to give people a sense of what it was like to live in a community like mine. I didn't think a whole lot of stories were told about white working class Americans. I didn't think a lot of stories were told about people who were struggling with some of the problems we were struggling with, joblessness, drug addiction, and so forth. And I thought that I could tell a story that would make people understand my family a little bit better, and maybe in the process, understand the struggles of a lot of families. I come from the places that I want to represent, and what we need is to stop sending people that are of the DC swamp. We need to send people who are of the places they aim to represent. I want to fight for the people that I come from.
The American media has been laundering foreign disinformation. It is disgusting. Instead of talking about the crises in our country, they try to silence the people who are experiencing them. Who do you want answering the phone? Do you want a person who hides from the friendly American media, or do you want a person who takes a bullet to the head and stands up and says, fight, fight, fight? Kamala Harris, you ought to have respect enough for your own people to enforce their border laws and listen to them. Listen to them when they complain about it. Don't pretend they're bad people. We're not bad people for loving this country. You're a bad person for doing this to the country in the first place.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the next Vice President and Second Lady of the United States, Senator J.D. Vance and Usha Vance.
Why don't we liberate these United States? We're the ones who need it worst. Let the rest of the world help us for change, and let's rebuild America first. Our highways and bridges are falling apart. Who's blessed and who has been cursed? There's things to be done all over the world, but let's rebuild it.
Wow. God. Thank you, thank you. It is great to be here in Racine, Wisconsin. But it's going to be even better in 8 days because I think we're going to win the state of Wisconsin and make Donald Trump the next president of the United States. Now, we have a lot of incredible people helping us. I know we've got a lot of folks, just volunteers, just in this room, but I want to give a special shout out to a couple of people. In particular, you guys are very lucky in the state of Wisconsin to have a great United States Senator in Ron Johnson. Ron, where are you? A good guy. We've also got the great Congressman Brian Stile. Brian, where are you? Thank you, man. And last but certainly not least, the beautiful Usha Vance. Thank you, honey, for being here. Now, I was told, actually, right before I came on the stage that I guess Governor Tim Walz was here just a few days ago. And they had, apparently they thought he was going to have 300 people, but he only had 200. That's too bad for Tim. But now we're here and we've got 1,000 people, so I'd say all the joy is with the Trump campaign.
Now, why, of course, we ought to ask ourselves, why is the joy with the Trump campaign? And I think there's a couple things that we have that they don't. First of all, I'm actually proud of my running mate's record, and Tim Walz is ashamed of his running mate's record. That's one big difference. But I figured out, I think that the thing that we're allowed to do on the Trump campaign that they wish they could do on the Harris-Walz campaign is just tell the truth to the American people. And, you know, there are all these little ways in which I think the dishonesty of the Kamala Harris campaign comes out, and some big ways too. But, you know, my favorite is I was reading a little bit about the news this morning, and I saw that Governor Tim Walz, they're going to appeal to the young men vote in the United States of America by playing Madden on the internet with AOC. That's their new strategy. They did that yesterday, and they did it, of course, during, you know, when most normal people were watching real football, not watching Madden online with AOC and Tim Walz. But he also, I guess, took to social media and said that AOC was really good because she ran a good pick six. And I'm like, you know, I'm a casual football fan. I paid attention to the NFL and college football for most of my life, and I don't know what it means to run a pick six. You know, you would, for the football fans in the audience, you know, you would like run a spread offense or you'd run a West Coast offense. You don't run a pick six. A pick six is something that happens on the field. And this guy's supposed to be a football coach, and I thought to myself, maybe I actually know more about football than Governor Tim Walz. And it's appropriate because I think that Donald Trump knows more about working at McDonald's than Kamala Harris. So now those are the little dishonesties that they tell about their past, but of course there's some big dishonesties that are at the heart of the Kamala Harris campaign. And the number one most important dishonesty is that she has nothing to do with what's been going on in the United States of America for the last 3.5 years. Kamala Harris would have us all believe that she was nowhere near Joe Biden, that she's had nothing to do with Joe Biden, that she doesn't even know what Joe Biden looks like, even though she has been the sitting vice president for the last 3.5, 4 years, and she used to brag that every major decision of the Biden administration, she was the last person in the room. And of course, not sometimes just the last person in the room, but we know because we can check the record that Kamala Harris cast the deciding vote on trillions of dollars of new spending. And what happened when we spent all that money? Groceries, gas, housing became less affordable. When the government prints money and spends money that it doesn't have, all of us pay that terrible hidden inflation tax, and we have Kamala Harris to thank for it. And so it takes a special audacity, a certain shamelessness that I think can only come from a true career politician for her to stand up in front of the American people and say things like, on day one, I'm going to tackle the affordability crisis that's affecting American families. Or she'll say, on day one, we're going to make the border more secure. And I think all of us with an ounce of common sense are saying, Kamala, day one was 1,400 days ago. What have you been doing that whole time? Now, Kamala Harris's surrogate, your illustrious governor, says that, quote, we have the greatest economy we've ever had. I don't even understand that argument. Here's the actual record. Over half of the counties in the state of Wisconsin have fewer jobs than before the pandemic, and manufacturing has been hit the hardest. And I know that Wisconsin is a proud state of American craftsmanship, so when folks lose those proud, dignified manufacturing jobs, it means, I think it hurts especially in states like Wisconsin, just like it hurts especially in states like Ohio. The cost of living is up 20% in the state of Wisconsin. The amount of money you're spending now to afford a life that you could have afforded when Donald Trump was president costs about $12,000 more per year. And in total, inflation has robbed Wisconsin families of about $28,000. That's the record of Kamala Harris. That is the record of the last 4 years. Is that the greatest economy we've ever had? So I think you'd all join me in saying, let's get back to the common sense economic policies of Donald J. Trump. Let's get back to prosperity in the state of Wisconsin and all across the United States. Now, we could go through a lot of other problems of Kamala Harris's economy, but it's not just that Kamala Harris has a terrible record, it's that Kamala Harris doesn't even know how to talk about what she wants to do. And I will tell you that as much as I disagree with our illustrious vice president, I will say one thing on her behalf. That every time she gives an interview, I think she does me and Donald Trump a big favor. I think we gain about 50,000, maybe 100,000 votes. Because remember, as much as she tries to run away from Joe Biden, as much as she tries to run away from all of the disastrous policies the last 4 years, occasionally Kamala Harris will make the mistake of telling the truth. And it usually will come up in the forum of one of these softball interviews. I don't know if you've seen Kamala Harris. She does not that many hard interviews. I think she's only done one maybe since the entire campaign started. And of course, you know, me and Donald Trump, we go everywhere. We talk to everybody because the people who want to lead you ought to go out and earn your vote, not be expected to just be given your vote. I think that's common sense. But, you know, Kamala Harris, during an interview with The View a couple of weeks ago, actually kind of gave away the ball game a little bit. And again, she does pretty much only softball interviews. But the problem with a softball interview is that you've still got to be able to hit a softball. And I don't know that Kamala Harris could hit a T-ball based on some of the conduct that we've seen over the last few weeks. Because remember, she's trying to say that she's had nothing to do with the policies of the last 4 years. So they give her the ultimate slow pitch right over the middle. They say, what would you have done differently? Name one thing that you would have done differently than Joe Biden. And she says, nothing comes to mind. Now, to be fair, I do think that could be the slogan of the Harris-Walz campaign, nothing comes to mind. But there's a serious truth behind it, which is that if you can't name anything different that you would have done over the last 4 years, then how can you run on being the candidate of change? How can Kamala Harris stand before the American people and claim that she is going to fix the affordability problems that she herself caused? How can she say that she's going to secure the border when she herself opened the border? How can Kamala Harris say that she's going to bring peace back to the world when it's her weakness on the world stage that has invited chaos and war to break out all over the globe? And the answer, my friends, is that she can't. So in 8 short days, I'd like you to help me and join me in saying, you're fired to Kamala Harris. Go back to San Francisco where you belong. I mean, there is so much that we could walk through with Kamala Harris's failed leadership. We could talk about the fact that our national debt has exploded over the last 4 years. We have never had, I know Ron Johnson cares about this as much as anybody in Washington, we have never had peacetime spending like this. You know, usually when you have a government spending like a drunken sailor, they at least have the excuse of a war. Kamala Harris doesn't even have that excuse. She's spending like it's World War III, and frankly, with her policies, she may walk us into World War III, but thank God we're not there yet, and yet she's spending like we are. Credit card delinquencies are at 9% in the United States of America. That means that about 1 in 11 of our fellow citizens are so strapped for cash that they can't even pay their bills. Auto mortgages are delinquent by about 8%. That means about 1 in 12 of our fellow citizens can't make their car payment. My friends, we could do so much better. We got to get back to the president who delivered the fastest rising take-home pay in a generation, the president who secured the border, the president who had inflation at 1.5%, and that's Donald J. Trump, and we're going to get him elected in 8 short days. Now, of all the issues that we could talk about, I think we believe in the common sense principle that our schools ought to educate our children and not indoctrinate our children, right? We believe in the common sense principle that America's troops ought to be used for our national security, that we shouldn't be the policemen of the world. I think most of us probably agree with that. But there is one issue, I think, above all others, where Kamala Harris has represented such a radical departure from the successful policies of Donald J. Trump, and that is at the border. And what a disgrace what's going on at the American southern border. You know, when I became the vice presidential nominee, one of the first trips that I made to Wisconsin, I talked to a lot of local police officers and sheriffs, and they told me that they had recently arrested a Mexican drug cartel member an hour north of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Almost hard to believe, and yet we have, all over the beautiful state of Wisconsin, we have drug cartel members who are selling fentanyl into our communities, who are committing violent crimes, who are sex trafficking minor children into our communities, and they're doing it because Kamala Harris rolled out the red carpet for the worst people in the world. And I think that we could do so much better with just a very, very simple principle. That if you came to this country illegally over the last 4 years, our message is very simple: pack your bags, because in 3 months you're going back home. And if you do that, because since 2020, you know that opioid deaths have doubled in this country. It's now the leading cause of death of our young people is drug overdoses, and most of the drug overdoses are caused by fentanyl brought into this country by Mexican drug cartels. Now, we talk about that problem all the time, and rightfully so, and my family was very personally affected by this. It's one of the reasons why I care so much about it. Now, I was raised by my grandmother, and the reason I was raised by my grandmother is because my mom struggled with addiction. And I'm proud to say that Mom has now been almost 10 years clean and sober, and that's an incredible grace. God bless you. Thank you. But I can't help ask myself, what if 15 years ago, when Mom had an overdose and I was a young kid praying by her bedside, hoping that she would wake up, what if she had taken what Kamala Harris has let come into this country over the last few years? I don't think that I would have gotten that second chance with my mother. And when you look at the number of people who are dying from this poison, we know that there are hundreds of thousands of American citizens who haven't gotten that second chance over the past 3 years. There are hundreds of thousands of American families, millions of people who didn't get that second chance with their mom, with their dad, with their loved ones, with their kids, because we allowed the worst criminal entity in the world to bring in and profit off of terrible poison in our communities. We are doing something to this country that is totally unforced and that is totally unnecessary, and it is going to stop when Donald J. Trump is back in the White House. But that is a problem, fentanyl, that we talk about a lot, and again, we talk about it a lot, rightfully so, but we don't talk about some of the other problems that come from that wide open southern border. We don't talk about the fact that we often are welcoming people into this country who don't speak the native language. And so what happens when those children end up in the schools of American children? We know that it distracts from a quality education for American citizens. I'd ask you to look, and you probably don't have to look, a lot of you have experienced it personally. Emergency room and hospital wait times are skyrocketing in this country. Why are they skyrocketing? Because we've allowed millions upon millions of people who have no right to be here to step in front of the line of American citizens. And I believe, by the way, that we should be a compassionate nation. I don't blame anybody for wanting to come to the United States of America, but first of all, you gotta come the right way and you gotta come through the proper channels. And second of all, and this is very, very important, you know who I do blame? I blame Kamala Harris and her open border. So let's say to her in 8 days, you're fired. Get the hell out of there. We want somebody who actually cares about America's citizens. Compassion is a very good thing, my friends, and I believe that we are a compassionate and generous country. In fact, I believe that we are the most compassionate and the most generous country in the history of the world. But our compassion and our generosity must start with our fellow Americans, our fellow citizens. That is where our leaders should focus, especially given how screwed up the world is in 2024. So let me just offer a couple of final thoughts on this border crisis, and then I want to talk about Kamala Harris's campaign, because as much as they talked in the early days that her campaign was the campaign of joy, I think this room has got more joy than the whole Kamala Harris campaign, but we'll talk about that in a second. There's one problem that I think the media is so dishonest about it, so I talk about it at probably every event that I do because it's important. And that's the issue of housing for young Americans in particular. I am the first millennial on a major party ticket, and I speak for a lot in my generation, and especially people who are even younger than I am. We want to be able to afford the American dream of homeownership, and we want every American child to be able to own a stake in this country that all of us love. But because of what's happened to housing prices, we have a whole generation of American citizens who are looking to the future, wondering whether they're ever going to be able to start a family or ever to be able to buy a home. Housing prices under Kamala Harris's leadership have risen over 40%, and of course, in a lot of communities in Wisconsin, they've risen a lot more than 40%. That is a disgrace. To do that to our young people, to tell them they're not going to be able to own a home in the country that their parents and grandparents built, we have got to do so much better. And here's how we're going to do it. Because there are two things that we've got to do to make the American dream of homeownership affordable again. Number one, we got to lower interest rates and build more houses. It's very simple. If you go and buy a house right now, mortgage interest rates are as high as they've been in probably 30, 40 years in the United States of America. And not to mention that, but we're not building enough homes. You know, think about this. Our ancestors went to the moon with pocket calculators and slide rules, and thanks to Kamala Harris's overreaching government, we don't make enough homes for our own citizens. We used to make rockets that went to the moon. Now we don't build enough homes. That's a terrible, terrible reflection of our current leadership. But the honest and hard truth, and this is what the media doesn't talk about enough, is that no matter how many homes that we build, if we don't ensure those homes go to American citizens, housing prices are always going to be unaffordable for the American people. And when you bring in 25 million people who have no legal right to be here, and you put them in homes that ought by right go to American citizens, you are stealing the American dream of homeownership from our people. So while Donald Trump and I will fight to lower mortgage interest rates, we are also going to fight to build more homes. We are most importantly going to fight to ensure that American homes go to American citizens and our young people will be able to afford the American dream again. So let's talk just a little bit about Kamala Harris's campaign, because I don't think it's going so well, my friends. But here's the thing is, she doesn't have a plan to run on. She doesn't have a record to run on. And when they ask her what she's going to do to solve the many problems that the American people are facing because of her broken leadership, you know, Kamala Harris, they'll say, what are you going to do to tackle the inflation crisis confronting our citizens. And by the way, when you ask President Trump that question, you ask me that question, the most important thing specifically that we can do to lower prices for our citizens is drill, baby, drill. Unleash American energy, and that is the most important thing. Now, because think about this, if a truck driver who delivers the groceries to the grocery store is paying 45% more for diesel, then all of us are going to be paying more for groceries. Or if the guy who delivers the lumber and the building materials to a job site is paying 40% more for gasoline, then all of us are going to be paying more for the homes that get built at that job site. So the most important thing we can do is just unleash America's energy workers, and Kamala Harris is proposing to do the exact opposite, which is probably why when they ask her what her specific plan, what does she want to do, no slogans, to solve the inflation crisis for the state of Wisconsin and the American people, she'll say, well, I grew up in a middle-class family. And I'm sitting there watching going, wait a second, you didn't answer the question. What are you going to do for those middle-class families so they can afford groceries and housing again? And if you don't have a specific answer to this question, you belong nowhere near the Oval Office of this country. So because they don't have a record and because they don't have a plan, what the Democrats have decided to do in this last week of the campaign is to double down on the most divisive rhetoric I think that we have ever seen from a major party presidential candidate in my lifetime. Because as much as Donald Trump and I have criticized Kamala Harris, and we'll criticize their plans, we'll criticize their disgraceful open border, Donald Trump and I want to be president of the whole United States of America. Even if you voted the wrong way, or will vote the wrong way in 8 days, we're still going to fight for you, and we're still going to fight for your interests. But here's the thing. That's not what Kamala Harris is saying. Kamala Harris has decided that she's not just going to attack me and President Trump, that she's going to attack the people who are voting for me and for President Trump, and I think that is a disgrace. We had a big rally yesterday in Madison Square Garden. It was very fun. We had a good time. We got on the campaign plane today because, you know, we had a good time. Then we had a good time after the rally, but because my kids wake up really early, we all left for the airplane around 6:30 this morning, and I got on my plane and I looked at my staff and I said, man, you all look like hell. Long night last night, so say a prayer for the Vance campaign staff. But we thank you. But we get on the plane, and I realized that Kamala Harris called the great patriots from every walk of life, from every faith, from every creed, from every background, white, black, and everything in the middle, 100,000 patriots, at least, between those that were inside of Madison Square Gardens and those that were outside, and she and her running mate are calling it a fascist rally. They're comparing it to a Nazi rally from 100 years ago. Go look it up. That's what they're doing. Now, it's absurd for a whole host of reasons. But you know one of the reasons it's most absurd is because the proud patriots, I imagine that nearly every person in this room has a relative who served in the Second World War. Our families actually went and defeated the Nazis. To call us Nazis is a disgrace. But I think it's extra ridiculous when you compare what Kamala Harris is actually running on versus what President Trump is actually running on. So I want you to look at this photo. I actually looked at this photo this morning, and we got some screens up here. So this is just something I Googled. I Googled troops landing at Normandy or something like that, and this is what comes up. Now, when these guys were fighting the actual Nazis back in 1944, I wonder what they would think about the Kamala Harris campaign and her policy proposals such as they are. Do you think that those men who saved a continent, and I would say saved the world for freedom and liberty, do you think that they were fighting to open the southern border of their own country? Because I don't. Do you think that those men were fighting for taxpayer-funded sex reassignment surgeries for illegal aliens? I'd like Kamala Harris to go back in time and hop on that boat and say that she wants taxpayer-funded sex reassignment surgeries for illegal aliens. And I'd like to hear the response of those brave men. Because I'll tell you, you got to be very precise with political language, okay? And so I decided to look up what is the exact phrase that I would use for a person who thinks those brave men were fighting for what Kamala Harris is fighting for today. And I looked in the dictionary, I thought very hard about it, and I came up with the perfect term. If you think those brave men were fighting for an open border and sex change surgeries for illegal aliens, the proper term for you is dipshit. And again, you got to be precise with your language in politics. The media is very tough. You got to choose the right words. And I apologize if there are any kids out there, but my mamaw cussed a lot. I turned out okay. So, one final thought, and then we'll take a few questions from the local reporters. We've had a lot of fun here, and most importantly, we're having fun in the service of something, which is saving this country and making sure our fellow citizens can afford the American dream again. That's really all this is about. We're trying to make it so that if you work hard and play by the rules, you can afford a decent life. And that's economic principles, that's securing that southern border so we have safe neighborhoods, that's making sure that we have a more peaceful world. All these things are necessary to live in a good life, but we're not going to do it unless we change the leadership of Washington, D.C. So I want to make 3 requests to you before we kick this over to the media. Number 1, I want you to post about this event on social media or text it to your friends, whatever method of communication you use, talk about what you heard here, and talk most importantly about why you're voting for Donald J. Trump for President of the United States. That's number 1. Number 2, there's a website called swampthevoteusa.com. That's swampthevoteusa.com. Go on that website, and you can check out how to get involved. You can check out your registration. You can check out your polling location. You can just make sure that you're prepared to vote on or before November the 5th. And I'd encourage you to take advantage of every method of voting that you have, whether it's early, whether it's on Election Day, whether it's by mail. We gotta use every method possible to get out there and vote. And here's the third request that I'm gonna make of you. And that's that I want each person in this beautiful hall, I want you to get out there and vote 10 times. Ron just shot me a look. He said, we're Republicans. We only vote once. Here's the way you're going to vote the legal way 10 times is you're going to take yourself to the polls and take 9 of your friends and family with you. And I want every person to make sure that happens by Election Day. We do that, my friends, we're going to make sure that we win Wisconsin and give the American people a president fit to lead this country, and that's Donald J. Trump. God bless you all. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here. All righty. Let's take a few questions from the reporters before we hit the road.
Senator Vance, thank you so much for taking my question. Jason Calvi, Fox 6, Milwaukee. Appreciate your time. At the Madison Square Garden event last night, you were there. A comedian said that Puerto Rico was a floating island of garbage. Your thoughts on that?
Well, my thoughts on that is, first of all, I didn't hear it when it happened. A comedian told a joke, and I don't think that's news worth making. I think what is news is that Americans can't afford their groceries because Kamala Harris has been a terrible vice president. And that's what the American people are interested in, and that's what the American people and the American media should focus on. Look, maybe I'm old-fashioned, or maybe I just grew up with a grandmother who had an especially foul mouth. But you know what I do? You know what I do when I think a joke is dumb or not funny? I don't laugh. I don't create a fake outrage cycle to distract from the fact that our fellow Americans can't afford to buy housing. That is outrageous, and that's something to be offended by. I'm a hell of a lot more offended that my fellow Americans can't afford to buy groceries or pay their credit card debt. That's more offensive than what a comedian said at Madison Square Gardens. And I'm most offended that Kamala Harris opened the American southern border and allowed tens of thousands of our fellow citizens to die of overdoses. That's not a joke, that's real life, and that's what we ought to focus on. Thank you. Next question.
Thank you, Senator Ricardo Torres, Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. Last Friday, Senator Ron Johnson said the massive deportation of 10 million people under President Trump would not be realistic, and it's not going to happen. Do you agree with him?
Well, I actually talked with Ron on the plane about it, and first of all, you know, Ron is a hell of a lot more articulate than I am. If you want to know what Ron thinks, then ask Ron. But what I think and what President Trump believes is that, number one, we've got to stop the bleeding. That's the most important thing, is we've got to stop we've got to stop the large inflow of illegal immigration in the first place. And you do that by building the wall, re-implementing deportations, and stopping the ridiculous catch and release policy of Kamala Harris. So you got to stop the bleeding first. And then you got to ask yourself, what do you do, of course, with the millions of illegal aliens that are already here? And look, I think that you start, of course, with the violent criminal migrants. You've got 425,000 people in this country who are violent criminal migrants. That's more than double the size of the United States Marine Corps. You start with them and get them out of our country on day one, or as close to it as possible.
I don't want to be in your thought.
And then I think from there, look, you can't go into this saying that every person who came here illegally gets to stay in the United States of America. If you do that, then you don't have a real border. So yes, we are going to deport people who came into the United States illegally. We have to, or the American people are going to suffer. And I'm focused on the American people, not on people who came to this country illegally. And just practically, there are a couple of things that you can do. First of all, we ought to make it harder for illegal aliens to work in the United States of America. We want people who are working, but legal. We want legal residents and citizens to be working in this country, not illegal labor. And I think that if you do that, combined with some real law enforcement, and by the way, every time I go to a local community, the local officers are telling me we would love to help the federal government with immigration enforcement because they're being overwhelmed. So if we empower our law enforcement to do their jobs and make it harder for illegal aliens to work in this country, I think that we'll go a long way to solving the immigration problem in this country. Next question.
Good evening, Senator Vance. My name's Adam Reif with CBS 58 in Milwaukee. This state was decided by about 20,000 votes 4 years ago, and about 23,000 4 years before that. Given razor-thin margins expected in a lot of swing states, are you concerned that the comments last night that your campaigns had to distance itself from today, are you concerned that that could tip minority voters in these key swing states? And what is your campaign doing to reach out to those minority communities in these final 8 days?
Yeah, so look, I'm not worried that a joke that a comedian who has no affiliation with Donald Trump's campaign told, that a lot of people are going to wake up and say, oh, we're not going to vote for Donald Trump now. We're going to look past the fact that we can't afford groceries because somebody made a joke that we don't like. I just don't buy that. I don't think that's how most Americans think, whatever the color of their skin. But, you know, I think the answer, how are we trying to reach out to people of color in Wisconsin and everywhere else? I think, look, every individual is different. Every individual community is different. I think what I've found is that a lot of Latino folks that we're reaching out to, they're really worried about the cost of goods. They're really worried about not being able to afford groceries. And a lot of them are devout Christians who are really worried that Kamala Harris has made it harder for them to practice their faith and raise their children as they see fit. So we're talking a lot about religious liberty to our Hispanic community. You know, I think a lot of black voters that we're talking to and we're doing very well with, they really like the fact that we're focused on economic issues and how to empower the American people to be able to afford the American dream again. I also talk to a lot of black voters who are sick of being told what to think and what to say by other people. They want to think for themselves. They're sick of the censorship in this country. And interestingly, when there are especially a lot of young black voters that I talk to, you know what, a lot of them are pretty pissed off that they were threatened with the loss of their job because they didn't want to take the COVID shot 3 years ago. They're pissed off about that, and that, of course, happened because of Kamala Harris. And then, of course, because we have such an incredible country, a lot of the concerns that I'm hearing among young black voters, I'm also hearing among older white voters. That people are worried about the state of this country, and they recognize that if we elect Donald J. Trump, we're going to unleash a golden age of prosperity in the United States of America. But if we double down on failed leadership, it's going to get a lot worse. We'll do one more question. I'll hit the road.
Hi, Senator Vance. Katrina Kaufman from CBS News. So your campaign has received a number of endorsements from the Muslim community, including on Saturday in Michigan. But last night, Rudy Giuliani made some disparaging comments about Palestinians, saying that Hamas is training 2-year-olds to kill Americans. What is your response to those?
Well, first, I mean, the implication is that Muslim Americans are defending the tactics of Hamas. That's sort of the implication of your question. I don't buy that for a second. I think there are a lot of Muslim Americans who may disagree with, you know, certain policies of the Trump administration. They may disagree with certain policies of Israel, for example. But most Muslim Americans, like most Americans, I believe are good people who want to live in a safe and secure and prosperous country. And they can disagree. Look, we can disagree on issues, but I just don't buy the idea that Muslim Americans are sitting out there thinking, well, we're super pro-Hamas. I think that the reason they're coming behind Donald J. Trump, and it's interesting, because I think for the first time in this country's long history, of course, the Middle East has been a basket case for 50 years. I think you can make a really good argument that whether you're a Jewish American who's very pro-Israel, and to be clear, I'm a pro-Israel guy, or whether you're a Muslim American who doesn't always agree with Israel, Donald Trump is actually the best candidate for both of those two camps. And why is that? Because Donald Trump is the candidate of peace through strength, and Kamala Harris is the candidate of war and chaos. And just think about this, right? So think about this. Let's just say that Kamala Harris is in a meeting with Netanyahu or whoever the leader of Israel is. She's in a meeting with Netanyahu, and she's in the meeting with, you know, a representative group of the Palestinians. And they say, Kamala Harris, how are you going to help us restore peace to our country? And she says, well, I grew up in a middle-class family. That's not going to work. You need somebody with an ounce of competence. You need somebody who actually has their own developed thoughts about how to solve the country's problems and how to engage diplomatically with the rest of the world. And whether you agree with him all the time or not, Donald J. Trump actually has ideas in his head about how this country ought to be governed. That makes him head and shoulders above the competition. Just that one thing. So let me leave you with this final thought here, and it's very simple. If you think about what this election is about, you don't have to agree with me on every issue. You don't have to agree with Donald J. Trump on every issue, but think about the big tent coalition that we've assembled. On the right, we've got people like Brian Kemp, Nikki Haley. On the left, we've got people like Tulsi Gabbard and Bobby Kennedy. This is the common sense coalition that's ready to take this country in a more positive direction. But it's very simple. Kamala Harris broke it, and Donald Trump will fix it. Think about this. Kamala Harris opened the border. Kamala Harris broke the border, and Donald Trump will fix it by closing it down. Kamala Harris inherited an economy with 1.5% inflation and rapidly rising take-home pay. Kamala Harris broke that, but put Donald Trump back in there and he'll fix it. Speaking of the Middle East, we had peace in Europe. We had a much more peaceful situation in the Middle East. We had peace in East Asia. Kamala Harris broke the world security situation, and Donald J. Trump will fix it. It's very simple. I have learned more about the greatness of the United States of America in the past 3 months than I think I could have ever hoped to learn in a lifetime. And I've learned that by going out to places like this, talking to our fellow citizens, realizing that we have a generosity of spirit in the United States of America that I think is unmatched anywhere in the world. We have the best natural resources, the most beautiful country anywhere in the world. The only thing that is broken about the United States of America is Kamala Harris's failed leadership. Let's fix that on November the 5th. God bless you all. Thank you. Thank you for having me, and let's get our guy over the finish line. Thank you.
In the factories and the fields, in the city streets and the quiet country towns, working together like spokes inside a wheel, they keep this country turning around. Hello